He was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1974, his first year of eligibility.
Wow, 50 years.
Good stuff. Thanks for joining us today, John.
Thanks for having me here.
Bill Hemmer will be back on Monday. Thank you for joining us. Outnumbered starts now.
We begin with this Fox News alert. House Democrats are vowing to step up their investigations into President Trump's personal businesses and charity after 3 days of testimony from former Trump attorney Michael Cohen this week. But the president today tweeted, "There's new evidence that Cohen committed perjury again." You're watching Outnumbered on a fine Friday. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Melissa Francis, Fox News contributor Morgan Ortegas, and beautiful yellow today.
Thanks, Harris.
And popping the cobalt, Fox News contributor Rachel Campos Duffy. And I won't talk about his clothes. The Couch Democrat guest today is Democrat strategist and former Hillary Clinton and Al Gore campaign advisor, Richard Goodstein. Good to have you. Melissa Francis?
Yeah?
It's great to see you.
Oh, thank you.
Are we ready for Friday?
Yes, absolutely.
Let's
I love it.
We got him.
Yes.
Welcome.
Good to be back. You had me last June, and I said to Melissa, you know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I survived. So bring it on.
Wow.
You're a good sport.
Yeah.
Let's
there we
scoot
go.
To the news. Michael Cohen is set to return for another round of testimony next week, and a Russian-born business associate who worked on the Trump Tower Moscow project is testifying the following week. This is House Democrats are reportedly looking to use Cohen's testimony to turn up the heat on President Trump. They're considering calling in some of his top business associates and family members to testify on Capitol Hill, including Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg and the president's attorney, along with his son Donald Trump Jr., daughter Ivanka, and son-in-law Jared Kushner. Here's Democratic House Intel Committee Chairman Adam Schiff.
He'll be returning on March 6th for additional testimony. I think we all feel it was a very productive interview today where he was able to shed light on a lot of issues that are very core to our investigation, and we were able to drill down in great detail.
But Ranking House Oversight Committee member Jim Jordan is going after Cohen's testimony after referring him to the DOJ, saying he again has committed perjury. Watch it.
You're not supposed to say things that are not true in front of a congressional committee, particularly when you're the first announced witness of this Congress, and in 2 months you're going to prison for lying to Congress, and then you come in front of Congress and guess what? You don't tell the truth? That is not supposed to be how it operates. The guy they brought in to start their whole plan to move on their crazy impeachment process was Michael Cohen, as I said, a guy who was going to prison for lying to Congress.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is on Capitol Hill. Mike.
Harris, good afternoon to you. President Trump says his former fixer Michael Cohen was shopping around a book which directly contradicts his Capitol Hill testimony. The president tweeting Michael Cohen's book manuscript shows that he committed perjury on a scale not seen before. He must have forgotten about his book when he testified. What does Hillary Clinton's lawyer, Lanny Davis, say about this one? Is he being paid by crooked Hillary using her lawyer? Michael Cohen spent 3 days on Capitol Hill this week, 2 behind closed doors, 1 in open session. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, a former federal prosecutor, says Cohen gave House committees leads to follow up.
What he really did yesterday was create a whole bunch of additional witnesses that the House is now empowered to try to bring before them. Folks like Alan Weisselberg at the Trump Organization, who he must have mentioned a dozen times. The president's children, who he said was involved in the hush money payments and others.
Now, top Democrats are praising Cohen following his appearances this week.
He was fully cooperative and answered all of our questions. This has obviously been an excruciating time for him, and we're very grateful that he was as forthcoming as he was. He needed to tell us the full truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. None of the questions we had for him went unanswered.
And Cohen teased he'll be back on Capitol Hill, too.
Thank you all so much for waiting around for just me. There's not much I can say other than it was very productive. As I said, I'm committed to telling the truth, and I will be back on March 6th to finish up. There's more to discuss.
All indications are this is just the start of many congressional hearings looking into the president's business dealings, his campaign, and even his family. Harris?
Mike Emanuel, thank you very much. Richard, I'm going to come to you first on this. What are Democrats hoping to get to in all of this from a criminal liar?
I don't actually think that what Michael Cohen said bears a ton of weight on what the Democrats will proceed to do. Think about what we know independent of Michael Cohen, and not from mainstream media and not from Twitter. We know from Paul Manafort's lawyers that he met just uptown here to deliver to a Russian spy secret polling data that enabled the Russians to figure out how best to help the Trump campaign win. And we know from the intelligence community that they think that's exactly what the Russians did. And we know about the payoffs to Stormy Daniels. All this we knew independently of anything that Michael Cohen said. It's interesting, though, I would say, that not one Republican sprang to the defense of Donald Trump. It was all, during the hearing and since, it was all about what a creep Michael Cohen is. And I would say if that's the best you can do, it's going to be a long couple years.
That's interesting because the House Intelligence Committee, at least one of their aides, was talking about whether or not you would see any of these people mentioned up on the Hill. In fact, Chairman Elijah Cummings said, per Cohen, all those names he said, if you're on that list that he talked about, you have a good chance of hearing from us, at least from an interview. So I don't think that it is actually accurate to say that Cohen and what he said doesn't have a bearing on where Democrats will go.
If you don't mind, they're getting Alan Weisselberg's name because Alan Weisselberg cut an immunity deal with the Southern District of New York. They didn't need to hear from Michael Cohen about his complicity in wrongdoing. That's what I'm saying. All these names came out independently of
Trump
what Michael
Organization
Cohen said.
assistant Rona Graff.
Her name's been in the news ever
Trump's
since.
longtime bodyguard Matthew Kellermeyer.
Exactly. These people, any investigator who's been close to Trump, and we know it's a tight-knit group, right? And so we know that everybody who was close to Donald Trump, like Rona Graff, we've known about her for years since Trump announced his candidacy.
All right, I'm going to ask the indulgence of the couch with one more bite at the apple, and then I'll pass the baton. What is the goal here? Because it seems like the goalpost is moving. Have we just shifted from was there Russia coordination, or as some call it collusion, to can we get the president on anything, including his finances? And would that make it a witch hunt?
Yeah, I think what the Democrats would say is they're carrying out a constitutional duty of oversight. Think about, again, what we knew in 2017 and 2018 when the Republicans controlled the House about Manafort. Gates pleaded guilty. Flynn pled guilty. We knew about Stormy Daniels. We knew about any number of different things, none of which were subject to hearings. So this is long overdue and not a witch hunt.
Okay.
And so we'll see.
I would say, I mean, Rachel, I'll ask you because what Richard is he's talking very much about Russia. And it seemed like, I think this is the road that you were going down. It seemed like from some of the questioning and some of the things that we've heard out of Congress this week is that they're kind of shifting away from Russia and towards financial crimes as a way to undercut or try to impeach the president. At the same time, there was a great article, I think it was in Axios last week, talking about, or at the beginning of this week, talking about one place where they're not talking about Russia and they're not talking about impeachment and they're not talking about financial crimes is Iowa.
Right.
And that as the Democrats
or Wisconsin
go
or
out,
Michigan.
Well, sure. But as the Democrats go out and they try to get support and get ready for 2020, that the rest of the world the rest of this country is focused on what can candidates do to improve their lives versus take down this current president.
So first, I want to agree with you, Richard, because I've been listening to Chris Christie, and he's been very critical of how the GOP has not been defending, have just been saying Cohen's a rat, he's a liar, he's a liar, he's a rat. And we kind of already know that just looking at him. He looks super shady, right? And so the question then is, why weren't they defending Trump? And Chris Christie says this is a failure of the communications team at the White House and coordinating with those in the hearing who absolutely had to know what was coming with Cohen. So I will agree with you that they didn't do a good job. That said, back to your question, Melissa, I just believe this is a big miscalculation on the part of the Democrats to shift from collusion, which, by the way, I think they know that nothing major is going to come out of Mueller. I think that's an indication that they believe. And they've moved now to his personal finances. And I will say that one, no one's talking about that in Iowa. No one's talking about it in the places that the Democrats need to win. But more importantly, the people who voted for Trump and the people they need to win over in order to win in 2020 already know he's a playboy who cheats on his wife. They didn't care about that. They already know that he's somebody, he's a business.
Actually, no. Some of those women who are in the suburbs do care about those issues.
But let me just finish what I'm saying. People know and are kind of like, everyone wants to pay as little as possible in taxes. No one's going to, he won without having turned in his tax returns. So this is a witch hunt. It's moved over, and I don't think it's going to work for them.
Morgan, I want to get you in the conversation based on some of the evidence that came out of boxes that were first with the FBI and then with Michael Cohen. Specifically, the check that was written after the president was already in the White House for $35,000. Michael Cohen says it represents an agreement that they had to repay money that was paid per the Stormy Daniels case. And so did that change anything, seeing that particular piece of evidence? There was another check, too, that was signed by Weisselberg and Don Jr. for the same amount.
So I think so the Southern District has purview over that particular piece, and not Mueller. So the Southern District, I think, will have to determine what the intent was behind that check. We have Michael Cohen, as you started out saying, a convicted liar, who said that this is what it's for. We saw Jim Jordan say that he's putting Cohen forward for at least 6 attempts, what he thinks was 6 times that he perjured himself in the open hearing just this week. So that is that's going to be something for the Southern District to determine. I think what we're really seeing this week goes beyond oversight. For me, this is Plan C in the process. Plan A was, getting the president out via almost a bureaucratic coup, as some people would call it, by top political leadership in the FBI and the DOJ. Plan B was Mueller. And so Plan C is, we think that this Mueller report, there might not be any collusion. There might not be a smoking gun here. So if there's nothing in the Mueller report, Plan C is to impeach him in the House via these methods. And that's where I think we're going to see the rift among Democrats. We're going to talk about this later, not just in voting, but Nancy Pelosi and top Democrat leadership know that this is it's politically toxic for them to be pursuing.
Okay. In the meantime, Michael Cohen's testimony Wednesday putting a disputed report in BuzzFeed back in the spotlight. In January, the online publication reported that President Trump had, quote, explicitly ordered Cohen to lie by telling Congress that negotiations over a Trump Tower Moscow proposal ended earlier in the presidential campaign than they actually had. So the BuzzFeed report, in case you didn't memorize it, it reads, quote, it is the first known example of Trump explicitly telling a subordinate to lie directly about his own dealings with Russia. That brought a sharp and rare rebuke from the special counsel's office denying that specific report. And even fellow journalists took shots at BuzzFeed. But BuzzFeed now saying that Cohen's testimony backs up their report that Trump explicitly ordered Cohen to lie. And here's what Cohen told Congress on Wednesday. Listen.
Mr. Trump did not directly tell me to lie to Congress. That's not how he operates. In conversations we had during the campaign, at the same time I was actively negotiating in Russia for him, he would look me in the eye and tell me there's no Russian business, and then go on to lie to the American people by saying the same thing. In his way, he was telling me to lie.
BuzzFeed editor-in-chief Ben Smith tells the Washington Post that Cohen's testimony, quote, lines up very closely with what we reported he had told the special counsel. But Richard Toffel, president of the investigative reporting nonprofit organization ProPublica, sharply disagrees, and he tweets, quote, it looks like the big BuzzFeed story from January about Trump telling Cohen to lie to Congress is wrong. Can't see how you can square the first, 7th, or 8th paragraphs of this with Cohen's opening statement for today. So, Richard, I'll ask you, because the subject of this is, does BuzzFeed have any credibility left? I mean, this is when this came out, we thought, wow, there must be a tape where it's recorded, him saying it. And now after this, they're still sticking with it. What's your thought?
I've always thought this BuzzFeed story was an enormous misdirection, because what matters to Adam Schiff, what matters to Mueller, what matters to U.S. public are the facts, not what BuzzFeed is reporting as facts. And I actually think the fact that Michael Cohen didn't take the bait and lay this on Trump and say he told me to do that. Just like he said other things he knocked down that were these kind of accusations against Trump that would have been kind of under just a little bit above the surface. He knocked them down. So had he really wanted to take his opportunity to just get at Trump as much as he could, he didn't. So it's odd that somehow or other Donald Trump and all the Republicans are saying he's a liar, 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 except when he says there's no collusion.
But the BuzzFeed. I'll start with you, Maureen.
Yeah.
Do you believe anything you read in BuzzFeed?
No,
I think
BuzzFeed's
this is the
a
subject.
joke. It's a complete joke. And if I want to learn about things I missed in the 90s, then I'll click on a BuzzFeed article. But other than that, listen, I believe Mueller in this instance. And the Mueller team made a very rare exception to come out and discredit this report. So I think I believe Mueller over Ben
Well,
Smith.
I think it's interesting that he says, look, Donald Trump didn't tell me to say this. I just kind of knew what to say. This is a guy who's looking for leniency. He also doesn't know. He knows what the Democrats want him to say, and he didn't go as far as to say that Donald Trump explicitly told him, but he is saying things he knows the Democrats want to hear and throughout that hearing because he's looking for leniency. This is a man with no credibility, with a motive to lie, and I think we ought to just take it for what it is.
Can I just ask a question? I know this is a little outside the box, but I have been curious because when you talk about someone who says he has no evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, and when you talk about someone who, as you pointed out, when he doesn't know something or can, kind of step up and say the president didn't do this, like there was violence that was talked about, and he said no way would the president ever engage in that. So, but I'm curious, why did he pick things like race? Like, why are we adjudicating something so nationally divisive because of something that Michael Cohen says about the president or anybody else? Why is that even part of any of this?
Yeah, I don't know when the story is written.
You're not going to impeach the president over race.
Of course, and it's inflammatory, and as people commented, when John Dean testified against Richard Nixon, who was a racist and anti-Semite, he didn't mention those things then.
So why are Democrats seeming to be so interested in that?
Well, I'm not sure that...
Or are they? I don't know.
And I don't know that it tells us anything we didn't know before. We know that Donald Trump and his dad were prosecuted by the Justice Department for race discrimination in housing. We know what he said about the Central Park 5. This is not news.
Bringing it up in this hearing, why take a bite at that apple if you're a Democrat in leadership? What does that get you? We're not talking about the legalities of what may have happened with this president.
It's to tear down Donald Trump.
That's not what Michael Cohen was saying.
This is about 2020 and making it seem like it's somehow a fact that he's a racist when there is no obviously any proof of that.
Yeah.
All right. A surprising development after an ugly dust-up between Congressman Mark Meadows and freshman Democrat Rashida Tlaib after she accused the congressman of a racist act. Their moment on the House floor and what this means for civility in Washington, oh my. Plus, Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez reportedly warning moderate Democrats that she's putting them on a list. And it's raising new concerns over whether or not there's a place in the Democratic Party for mainstream ideas.
Rising, we're told, over a House vote on Wednesday when more than 24 Democrats voted with Republicans to add an amendment to a gun control bill. The amendment requires gun sellers to notify ICE when an illegal immigrant tries to buy a gun. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, also known as AOC, reportedly scolded the 26 Democrats and broke ranks to support the amendment. Then the Congresswoman reportedly went farther than that, telling the moderates that she was putting their names on a, quote, list and threatening to help mount primary challenges to them in 2020. A spokesperson for AOC told the Washington Post that progressive activists are going to want explanations for the vote, and they're, quote, going to want a list of names, and she's going to give it to them, end quote. Richard, there's a list. And what will that mean politically if you're on the list by AOC?
Let me tell you what it's going to mean. There are 101 members of the pro-business New Democratic Caucus. It's much bigger than the Progressive Caucus or any other Democratic caucus in the House. Of the 40 members that the Democrats just picked up, 33 were New Dems. 0 were endorsed by Bernie Sanders or the groups that AOC is affiliated with. One more fact, Democrats got 23 million votes in the primaries last year. She got 14,000 against Joe Crowley. The point is, yeah, the press loves her. And how could you not, right? She comported herself pretty well, actually, at that hearing with Michael Cohen. But she has no seniority. And I think, frankly, with moves like this, she's going to get people trying to, like, knock her down a peg.
I was just going to say, that's exactly what I thought. I think she's inviting all of those guys to primary her, find a primary candidate for her. And I wonder, why is Nancy, I mean, just as a Democrat, why is Nancy Pelosi appeasing her? Because clearly, I mean, this is how the GOP, by the way, lost their majority, was, you know, the Freedom Caucus not making room for some of the moderates.
As of recently, she hadn't even opened a district office.
I know.
So, I do think she's got to stick to her knitting a little bit because, you get 14,000. That doesn't mean there's this broad support in your district. So whether
but why is Nancy letting her get away with it?
Well, I'm not sure what it is she's letting her get away with. We haven't actually had a vote, and I'm positive there will not be a vote on the Green New Deal.
Just this?
Well,
and you said, and I want to quote you, and I'll ask it as a question. You said, I'm sure people heard you, she's a bully.
Yeah. She really is going after people who don't agree with what she says.
Why
and
do you think it is?
Intolerant. Well, I don't know. I mean, sometimes I think that that's the fundamental difference between the left and the right. From a very basic point of view, that on the right, I would think our big goal is freedom. I mean, I don't consider myself a conservative or Republican, but I consider myself a lover of freedom. You pursue your life. You do for your family what you think is best.
You don't think Democrats love freedom?
I think that Democrats are more about a community. And that's like where the idea of, and I don't mean that in a bad way or a good way. It's about the collective more, and the collective can help each other, and it takes a village. And that's why socialism appeals. It's like we kind of all hold each other together. So maybe that's what defines how they get together as a party, is like, we're going to work together, as opposed to on the right, where everybody's like, we're independent. But this is taking it to the extreme, where it almost feels like fascism, where if you don't believe what I believe, you're wrong. And
Except
everyone
she's
has
not a
to
leader
think
of anything.
And I'm going to put you on a list.
So, Morgan, I want to ask it this way. You heard Rachel saying, well, why is Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, appeasing her? AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has had the ability to galvanize around the Green New Deal. I mean, she's got a marketability. She may not have that office that you're waiting for her to open, but she is open for business. And her business is oppositional, contrary to, she gets it done per her own vision. So what would you do as a leader? Wouldn't you have to appease her?
Let me just say, Harris, you stole the thoughts right out of my head.
Really?
No, I totally agree
I'm never
with
as smart as you are.
That's not true. But she may not be politically the most powerful, but emotionally, when it comes to the base, she had a Green New Deal that had some of the most ridiculous, untested, unvetted language in there, that she got 6 senators who are running for president who couldn't get a single staff member to read it, but were so quick to sign on to it. She helped lead a movement to get Amazon, one of the most powerful companies in the world, out of New York City. Establishment Democrats, with all due respect, and many of them sit on this couch, are completely, I think, out of touch with the base of their party. She may not politically lead it, but emotionally, this woman has more gravitas and more ability to get people who are running for the highest office in the land to sign up to what she says, no matter how utterly ridiculous the proposals are.
It reminds me of when President Trump turned the Republican Party upside down.
I want to give Richard the last word on that, because if somebody is running away with your political party, what will you do?
Yeah. She's not. Let's just talk about the Green New Deal for a second.
Well,
the Green New Deal is the Democrats saying we need to address climate change. The Republicans, regrettably, saying no. And imagine being all the millions of millennials.
But that's
things about the millions of millennials who hear the message with the Democrats saying, yes, we need to aggressively attack climate change.
Get rid of
and
cows
people on
and
the right.
airplanes.
No, they're not. I'm saying that's the caricature, that if you're a millennial, you're smart enough to know that's not at all.
It's interesting
what
you're positing, though, because it does do what Pelosi says. It does bring forth suggestions. And the criticism among Democrats, even among themselves, but certainly from the other side of the political aisle in 2016, is, well, where are your ideas on economics? Where are your ideas on these things? So if nothing else, that you feel like
the Green New
she's
Deal
doing
is like an RFP. It's like a request for proposals. It's like, tell us what you think, but that's all it is.
That's not how
Real quickly, Governor Cuomo is on a repeal mission with Amazon right now, and we'll cover that as it happens. Can he get Amazon to come back? That's been making news all day. All right, let's move on. Democrats are pouncing on a report that the president has ordered top officials to give his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, a top-secret security clearance. The reaction from Kushner's camp as he fires back. Stay with us.
Not having a good breakfast can make you feel like your day never...
The New York Times reports that President Trump ordered officials to grant a top-secret security clearance to his son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner. Kushner was granted a security clearance last May after a lengthy background check. The Times, citing anonymous sources, say President Trump demanded Kushner's clearance over the concerns of intel officials, then Chief of Staff John Kelly, and then White House counsel Don McGahn. But a spokesman for Kushner's lawyer, Abby Lowell, saying Mr. Kushner's security clearance was handled in the regular process with no pressure from anyone. That was conveyed to the media at the time. But the president's critics pouncing on the report. Here's Democratic House Intelligence Committee member Jim Himes.
If the FBI and the CIA and others say we have qualms about giving this individual access to the most sensitive information we have, it's not because they don't like that individual, because they're participating in something political. It's that they understand that there are circumstances, it might have been business dealings, it might have been past misbehavior, that could give foreign powers leverage over somebody in a very sensitive position.
So, Morgan, I mean, you have a security background, so I want to go to you first. The president has the right to, you know, give this clearance to whomever he feels like he needs to speak to, right? So why are they continue to make a big deal out of this story? What is in there that is the gotcha to the president?
Well, I think it's because the Jared's attorney is refuting the story and saying that it's not accurate. So the interesting thing is that we reportedly, no one has seen it, and maybe the House committee will get a hold of it. There's reportedly a memo by the chief of staff at the time that he was ordered to give the clearance. And again, Jared and his team and Ivanka are all refuting it. So I think one of the reasons that it's news is because, you know, the New York Times is saying one thing and the Kushners are saying the other. But you're absolutely right. The president could come and sit on this couch and give you a clearance right now if he wanted to. That's within his prerogative to do so. They're saying that he's gone through the normal process. There's a few different levels of having a clearance, of course. The question, I think, for people is, you know, if you don't go through the normal process and you're not granted a clearance, why would that be? Is it because of your foreign contacts? Is it because of business dealings? So I think what the House is trying to get to here is there something related to the business? I think this is all related to the very first segment that we talked about, where it's investigating the businesses and trying to find something there.
Interesting. You know, Richard, I know that you have worked with the Clintons and you probably have some awareness about clearances. And I did a little drill down today. The president actually can raise or lower his own security clearance based on a need to know with any faction in government. Right. So if he can do that, if he has access to that information, and if he has the ability, as Melissa pointed out, to bring anybody on board and give them a clearance. Also, as Morgan has just said, what is the there?
Yeah. So why did the CIA not consent to getting him this top security clearance? Why did the chief of staff, if the reports are true, and the White House general counsel put memos to the file saying they were ordered to do this against their better judgment? You know, you talk about prerogatives. The president had the prerogative when he sat with his intelligence people who said, the North Koreans can strike us with their missiles, and the president said, no, Putin tells me differently, and I believe him. That's his prerogative. Is that smart? Was it smart for him in Helsinki to say, I believe Putin over my intelligence people?
Do you think that's what this is about? Is it about, Rachel, I guess, saying that the president is guilty of vast overreach, or is it about that they're trying to dig up something in Jared Kushner's past and link him to something else? I mean, that's kind of where it feels like it's going, is they're trying to say there's some big dark secret in Jared Kushner's background that has been unearthed that we don't know about yet, and that's why he didn't get clearance. That's where I thought Richard was going in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, that could be the reason, but I would say in general, I mean, lots of people advise the president not to make his kids advisors, and it certainly is something that a lot of people, even Republicans, said was not a very good idea. And, you know, here is another example of why. And so you wonder who's advising the president and why he does that. On the other hand, you know, you see how many, you know, snakes were in his campaign, how many snakes are in the deep state, and you understand why he wants to have his family close, and he has a history as a family business of having them as advisors. It's a complicated situation, but these are the dangers of doing that. But he certainly has the the ability he has the authority to do that. So why would he lie about it and say I didn't?
I know we have to go. I just want to say one quick thing. As a part of this report, I would love to know the senior aides to Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State that mishandled classified information. I would have lost my clearance for it. I would just like a part of this report to know what happened. Do those people still have their clearances, or was it taken away?
That's a great question.
It is great.
So we are hearing plenty about a gender double standard when it comes to the Democrat women who are eyeing the White House. Now the woman who lost last time around is weighing in on what they may be up against and whether there could be strength in numbers.
But now, Ivanka,
the fact that we have these other women running now, I think is all to the good, because then it's not just one woman, you know, and you hold her to an impossible standard because she's the only one out there.
All right, another Democrat joining the race for president in 2020. Washington Governor Jay Inslee announcing that his campaign will center on fighting climate change. Meantime, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in a podcast interview seemingly ruling out the possibility of ever running again, but also addressing how sexism may play out on the campaign trail with some 2020 female candidates like Senators Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar, who are already facing questions about likability and treatment of staff. So Morgan, I'm going to go to you because
I think that my having gone through it last time should make it a little easier. I've been in and around politics for a long time, and there are a lot of men who are really unlikable who get themselves elected to very high positions. But I don't understand fully why the press just sort of defaults to these sloppy, unfair characterizations. And at least so people are being called out about it now.
Yeah.
Well, Morgan, I'm going to go to you. Yeah. I'm the wife of a political person, and you know when he has,
you are brave for that.
When he has missteps, it's certainly thrown back at him. I can guarantee you, if he ate his salad with a comb and asked a staff member to clean it, he would face the heat for that. So, do you agree or not with what Hillary's saying? Do women have an unfair, with the media on?
Okay, I'm going to make Twitter explode because I'm going to agree with her. In some ways, and here's what I say. You know, when she said there's some men that get elected that are not likable, that's true, but not to the presidency. So I guess maybe I disagree with her there. I mean, typically whoever wins is a very charismatic person, Republican, Democrat, whomever. I do think that women, we are still getting used to being on the national stage. I mean, look what they did to Palin in 2008 and how she was crucified. So I think, we get criticized for our hair, for our makeup. You guys do it on Twitter. If you don't like what we're wearing, you say something to us. And so we're still learning, I think, how to run for the highest office in the land. And I think sometimes we do it to ourselves. Sometimes we're stiff. Sometimes we're trying to play a caricature. So I think whether it's a Democrat or Republican, I still think women get hammered. Nikki Haley got hammered this week for going to visit the Kind factory where they make the little Kind protein bars, and she's amazing.
But actually, the point you bring up is very interesting, Melissa, because every example you gave is of a conservative woman politician. So is it that conservative women are the ones getting the harder time, and that
first of all, I think everybody gets hammered for everything now. That if you dare go on Twitter and you read the comments on everyone, I mean, it is equal opportunity just bashing out in social media. If you think about the men who haven't succeeded in politics, it's for the same thing as being not likable. I mean, when they said Mitt Romney was too stiff or Jeb Bush low energy, whatever reason it is, that the person isn't that word you used, charismatic.
Well, Mitt Romney had binders of names full of women.
Right, but everybody makes missteps and does things to be attacked. Yes, Richard, are you going to be brave? You're going to venture into this woman conversation?
To make 2 points.
Yes.
It's wild that Hillary was the unlikable one when, at least in the primaries. Bernie Sanders is the epitome of the grouchy old coot.
But he's authentic. I think that's,
okay, but he's not likable.
Beyond charismatic. Are they authentic?
But I will say this, just kind of, I asked the head of Emily's List, which raises money for female candidates. I said, how much of what happened in 2016 was rank gender bias versus personal to Hillary? And she said, I don't know. It might have been 2 points. It might have been 5. I said, you got a lot riding on that question, right? She says, absolutely. I just don't know how to get to the bottom of it.
I think it's about authenticity, though. If you look at that, you don't feel like Hillary Clinton is being authentic
all right, so you know her well, Hillary Clinton. Is she likable in terms of what you had to sell in a political sphere?
You know, you've seen these stories, for decades about the women in her immediate orbit who would have stopped a bullet for her, who would have thrown themselves in front of a train. That they were so fond of her, it was kind of off the charts.
Okay, they're fangirling, but I'm asking you.
No, these were professional women, Rhodes Scholars. I mean, these are people who have substance.
They could be fangirls.
Okay, fine. I think they take that from their experience. I mean, does Hillary, like Amy Klobuchar, have an edge to her sometimes? Absolutely, because she's smart and she's demanding. That's not so bad.
Well, some people would actually say that Hillary had an advantage because she was a woman and they wanted to elect a woman. So anyway, Republican Mark Meadows and Democrat Rashida Tlaib moving forward after their big dust.
Or go to gohartfordauto.com.
It is insensitive that some would even say it's the fact that someone would actually use a prop, a black woman, in this chamber, in this committee, is alone racist in itself.
A heated exchange followed that allegation of racism during Wednesday's Michael Cohen hearing. And yesterday, Representatives Mark Meadows and Rashida Tlaib hugging it out, the two embracing on the House floor in a striking bipartisan contrast to Wednesday's tense back and forth. Tlaib accused Meadows of using a black woman as a prop after he invited housing and urban development official Lynn Patton to defend President Trump from Cohen's claims of racism. Tlaib suggested that strategy was in itself racist. Here's Meadows on their moment of reconciliation.
We're in a civil society. That's what separates us from all other nations is a civil society. And I've just felt compelled to go down and offer a hand of friendship and say, listen, if there was anything that I did that personally offended you, it didn't come from my heart. She hugged me, and certainly we looked at moving forward to hopefully work.
Richard, one of the moments in that sort of catastrophe of a hearing was Elijah Cummings, who came out during this whole heated exchange and sort of tapped the brakes on everything and made a moment of peace. And I thought that was a beautiful moment. How did you feel?
No, Mark Meadows is a lovely guy. I felt for him at the moment, and I don't think people beyond Elijah Cummings knew that he had nieces and nephews who were black. And probably for him to talk about it was not something, obviously, that he'd done too much. Hats off to Cummings. It just speaks to how race is such a touchy subject that you get into a context like this, and you sometimes don't know which is up and which is down.
It's not just touchy, though. It's being used by Representative Tlaib as a weapon. And it was insulting. And I'll tell you this, lots of minorities who are conservative like myself have been accused of being a prop. What an insulting thing. And what an insult to say that my color should in any way determine what my ideas are.
Amen.
Or what my political thoughts are. Shame on her. And I thought Representative Meadows was far too nice. In fact, I wish she hadn't have been that nice. She needs to be called out on it because, in fact, she is the racist. She's made anti-Semitic comments, has spoken with Louis Farrakhan. She is the pot calling the kettle black.
Well, one thing I would say is that there's probably enough of stuff to go around. And you can pretty much find video these days of anybody. I mean, I know that they've been putting up some videos of Representative Mark Meadows on the campaign trail when he was running in North Carolina. But the bigger point is what happened moving forward, and that is, can we get to a place where we can reach out to each other? Can we not judge each other by the color of our skin based on what you just said? Oh, I think I know everything about you because I know what you are. No, you don't. You don't know who or whose I am. And can we just get there together? The one thing that I would say with Representative Tlaib, and I don't know, I'd like to believe that she didn't mean it. Let's not call each other words like props and token. It really hurts because there are women out there and men out there who are doing incredible things in places where you might not expect to see them.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And it doesn't tell you anything more about them than they're trying to get there on merit. Let's start there. Lynn Patton has a very respectable and impressive resume. Let's start with, okay, I take exception. She could have put it this way. I take exception of you pointing out or failing to point out the important things about Lynn Patton, just to simply have her here on race. There was another way to do this, and she obviously was prepared to make that moment. I just don't think she made it well.
It was entered in the record.